Hi, I'm Sky from Rebirth Garments, and me and my employee Cala Bordy are going to show you how to thread and use a serger sewing machine. This is a domestic machine and it's available to buy online. I got it from my favorite Singer factory distributor place that's on Irving Park, Real West. They're really sweet there, and I've gotten all my machines there. Rebirth Garments was originally all sewn using domestic machines. I didn't get an industrial sewing machine for serging until this year, and I've been running the whole company since 2014. So you can totally run an entire company on just like one serger sewing machine that's a domestic. That's fine if you want. You don't have to be fancy, but I am very excited about the industrial now. So Cala will show you how to thread the machine like this. And then I will show you how to make this shirt into a crop top and sew a little patch. This will be the first easier project. So we're going to do that right now.
This is Radical Fit, an 8-month fashion-based program series that embraces craft, making, and DIY while providing a safe space routines to discuss gender equity and to dream and create through personal expressions of style. The initiative is funded through Project Next Generation, an education technology initiative of the Illinois Secretary of State and State Librarian Jesse White.
So to serge this particular serger today, we are well endowed with many tiny dots helping us figure out where our different threads go, including even up here on the little thread tree, all the little branches have all different colors. And so looking at the diagrams on the little knobs, it'll tell us we have our left needle, right needle, upper looper, and lower looper. And so I think we're going to decide our colors on that. And we want these two as our needles. And so I'm looking for my yellow and green dots. I'll put this under the yellow and this under the green so it kind of matches. And then our loopers are going to be this bright chartreuse and magenta. I'll put these over here. Especially when troubleshooting, if you're having problems with your threaded machine, I heard that it's ideal to unthread it and rethread it starting with your right needle and then your left needle and then upper looper, lower looper. And so I'm going to start with needles right now, even though this is not a threaded machine. So I'll start with my right needle, which is our kind of turquoisey thread. And I'm essentially just following all of our green little markers, going right here first, and then around, and you want to make sure that your foot is up so that your pressure wheels are loose so that you can get through them so they can grab on later. And I think I do one of these. All of this will be different on pretty much any but they usually are pretty generous with the dots, and every single one of them is going to have a little diagram on the inside of its door. And so I'm kind of just following along here and seeing what I need to do next. For the needles, there's going to be points where they're together and then they'll split apart and potentially come together again so that you'll eventually end up down with your two needles. So I think they both go through here, but then this one's going to come down first and be on the right, and then finally hook through this tiny little thread guide. And I try to get my needles all the way up and maybe even put my foot down so that I can squeeze in here and get my thread through my needle. Okay. And then pull that as taut as possible and kind of lift my foot up and shove it to the side. Okay, now I'll do my left needle with my lavender thread through these little yellow markings. Make sure my foot is up again. And then, so yeah, it'll join the green thread here, but then it'll start veering left, go through the final thread guide, and then down through the needle itself. Ooh, okay. Yeah, and this lip fray. And yeah, the thing about threading sergers is that there's a lot in your way. So right now I'm kind of got my fingers pinched around the blade so that I can get my left needle thread in there, and then again pull it taut to the left next to our right needle thread. Loopers are probably about 5 to 10 times more confusing and annoying to thread, because that's when you get up in the guts, and this one even opens this way so that you can poke your finger under here and do all your threading under here. But I'm going to start with my upper looper, which I think I'll choose this chartreuse. Go through all my little blue circles. And it'll start out similar to the needles, but then you'll go through your, lift my foot up again, go through your pressure wheel, and then we get down into the depths of the machine. And this is mostly where your diagram is going to come most in handy. But this one also obviously has all these little dots to help. So here's a little hook. Another little hook where it'll join with the other looper thread. And then looks like I go up towards this little loop. And yeah, if you can't get around any of these things, you can always move your wheel so that you can try to reach certain things.
Or use tweezers.
So yes. And then, yeah, tweezers especially can kind of serve as good fingers for these little out of place holes to thread. Okay, so then joins all our other threads on the other side. And then we have one more looper left. Our last little trail is our lower looper, which is going to be this magenta thread, which kind of matches our tiny little red dots. And let's start the same as all the other ones, and then do a little mimicry of our upper looper. Okay, so it looks like you go next to the blue, next to the blue again, and then around this little curly Q. Yeah, join it there. And then I have this little extra loop. So it looks like I should go through here, maybe grab tweezers to go down through here. Oh man. And grab so that it goes this way through the loop coming up. Alright, and then there's this little arm that does the moving down here that pops out over here, but I need to thread on the other side, so I'm going to push it back down. Threading this last little loop back here, I ended up below this bar, which does not move, so I'm going to first take my thread and get it above here, pass it to my other hand. I can carry on. This is a really convenient machine where this little hole, sometimes you have to thread it in other machines, but this one has a tiny little slit so that you can just hook it around and it'll fall through. which is so convenient. I'm gonna shed a tear. Once you have it through there, you have to pass it back under again, so I'm gonna turn my wheel. I have one more hole to thread, but I'm going to move my wheel so that I can see it a little better. It's this tiny little hole on this little pokey end, which is hidden whenever I'm under the way with my wheel moved. Okay. And so on the diagram it says it should go in front of what is this green thread. So I'm threading this little red, and it says on the diagram to go in front of the blue path, which for us is our chartreuse thread. And so I'm just going to thread front to back, but then make sure that I'm on this side of this little arm and our thread. So, yeah, because it's going to want to go to the back and do whatever it wants. But I'm going to kind of reach under, bring it out here, our little hole.
Now that Kala has so beautifully threaded our serger, we're going to turn the machine on. Blink. And then we're going to put a little piece of scrap in here so that when you lower the foot and lower the little needles in there, then the stitches can kind of work themselves out on the fabric, which is easier than them working themselves out just naked. And then you're going to hold on to these tails so that they don't go getting into the machine, and you're going to sew. So when you're starting out learning how to use a serger, it is really nice to have each color be a different, or each thread be a different color, and this will help you learn which side and which part of the stitch is which one. And then if you need to, I write on a lot of my machines with like Sharpie or with like dry erase marker to tell me notes about like what each thing means. So if you like can't remember, just feel free to write on your machine or put like little post-it notes or something. So here I looked at this and I was like, okay, it's looking okay. But then I was like, oh man, this pink, it's leaking over to this side. It's supposed to be just on the one side. So that means that the pink is too loose. And then when you want to change kind of the tension of what each of these threads are, you can dial it. Sometimes it's different ways. But the lower the number is, so right now this is at 4, this one's at 4, this is at 3, and this is at 4. So the lower it is, the looser it is, and the higher it is, the tighter it is. So I say lower, looser, that's how I remember, and then higher, tighter. So on all my machines, I usually write lower, looser, higher, tighter, because I can never remember otherwise. So here I was like, okay, this needs to be tighter. So it originally was at 3, and now it is at 4. And now that we have changed it to put it at 4, now this is looking perfect. So here we have our nice little serged bit. A fun and easy thing that you can do with a serger is make patches or hankies or anything like that, and you just will serge around the edges. So I'm going to take one of my very first hand screen printed Rebirth symbol patches that I made when I was like 20 or 21, and I'm going to serge around the edges. Start on the corner and lower that, and then I'll just go. Okay, so now that we are almost in the next corner, so it's confusing sometimes to people because what you're kind of paying attention to a lot with the serger is like how things are going in, like all the way over here, but then remembering that your needles are back here. So even though you're paying attention to where the fabric is going in here, you want to be mindful that even though it's in there from your perspective, the needles haven't yet hit it yet until like almost an inch later. And you also want to be mindful that there is a little blade here, which is awesome for keeping things nice and clean looking, but you want to make sure that you're not using pins where they can get cut by that blade and then the pin will go into the needles and get all scary in there. So I do everything without pins. Me and Calla use binder clips or these little sewing clips. So now that I'm like here, I want to just go do a couple more stitches until my needles are at the actual end of the fabric. So now I'm at the corner and we're going to lift up the foot and we're going to take the wheel over here and we're just going to jiggle it. And this will loosen up the threads. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And you can loosen up your threads so that you can then turn your piece around and then, because otherwise if you don't jiggle them, then the edges of your patches will get a little bit eaten up. Oops. So yeah, jiggle until it's nice and loose and then put these back down. And now we're going to sew again. Okay, so now I'm at the end. Gonna lift the foot and jiggle and put it back down. Lift, jiggle, put it back down. And then the fun thing about a serger is that you have these little tails here, and this will just get chopped off when you go through the blades, so you don't have to deal with them. So now you have a beautiful patch. Oops. And the corners are not too chopped off or weird. And you can either just cut this off, or I like to tie a little knot. For now, since you're new to serging, I would recommend just chopping off the bottom and practicing there. And also with t-shirts like this, you don't actually need to serge it. Since it's a knit, you can just cut it all and wear it as is, but we're trying to practice our serging techniques, so this is a good way. So I just line up the bottom, make sure that that's all nice and straight. You know, it's cool if you can iron stuff. I hate ironing things. You want to cut a little bit away from where your little design is, if there is a design on the crop top, because it will roll up a little bit. So sometimes when I would begin, I would cut it like right here, but then it would like roll up and I would be like, dang it. So we're gonna cut it maybe like around here. And I have a chalk, and if you want, you can be, you know, measuring stuff like, okay, I want to cut off 13.5 inches of this, and you can, you know, measure it out and then draw it, or go wild and just literally just eyeball it, because that's what I always do. And never throw away your pieces, because you can use this for something else. Like you can use this as a tube top, or you can use it to, you know, quilt later into something, or patchwork later into something. So I literally keep every scrap from everything when I make cut-off jeans, when I do anything. When serging, you want to be mindful of where you're going to start and stop. So I'm going to do it on this side, and I'm going to do it on the left-hand side of the shirt. I don't want because when serging, you have to overlap the threads a little bit, and I don't want that overlap to be like in the front, but I also don't want it to be like necessarily straight in the middle of the back. So I like putting my seams on the sides of things. Things don't really have to be perfect, which is nice. Like this doesn't have to be perfectly cut, because then the little blade will make it all nice and smooth for you. So yeah, right now we're on the side, lifted up the foot, put it under, I put the foot down, and then I put the needles in. And this is a simple project because we're not serging things together, we're just serging to create little, just a nicer edge, like hem. So now we're almost back to where we started. And what we're going to do is let this little end be chopped off. And you're going to run over this part just a little bit, and that'll just like really keep things knotted and good so that it won't undo. So yeah, so right now it's like, oh, it looks like it's done. But actually secretly it isn't, because there's underneath it isn't done. So we're gonna go and run over a little bit, and then what you're gonna do is like just abruptly you're just gonna let the stitches run off, and we're just gonna yank this to the side like that. I like to have a little tail, so here you can see where it kind of overlapped, and then I just got it to come off. And yeah, you never want to pull on this stuff like without it going, because it'll just make its nice little braided stitchy thing even when it doesn't have fabric in it. So you just want to let it run off.
Check out the rest of the Radical Fit playlist on the YOUmedia Chicago YouTube channel. We would love to see the projects you are working on, so use the hashtags CPL Radical Fit, YOUmedia, and YOUmedia Chicago, and tag us on Instagram and Twitter at YOUmedia Chicago. Or find us on our Facebook, YOUmedia at Chicago Public Library.